Mansour, let me ask you something. You were a Marine. Right. You probably, more than maybe even Stephanie and I would take offense with certain things that Americans do that seem either un-American or not supportive, particularly of our military and its engagements overseas. But I would assume that you, like every American, including those who have served in our forces, have at times been critical of certain American policies. And to be clear, people like you fight for our ability to actually do that, fight for our ability to be critical of things with which we don't agree.
That's exactly right. I guess, fortunately or unfortunately, are in the actual position of defending each and every person, right? So, unfortunately, in that time, certain times, that comes to people like President Trump and other racists that are out there saying all sorts of crazy things. I defend their right, I guess, to be the way they are. You know why this is something that's particularly scary for me, and as it hits to the core, is someone like myself who did come from a different country, but made this country their home. Mm-hmm. This is my country. I put on the uniform. I pretty much signed on the dotted line. And when you sign on the dotted line, I think some Americans may not understand what that means. That means you're giving your life. Anything can happen at that moment. So that's the highest level of sort of patriotism. Not to say that you can't be a patriot without serving in the armed forces, but I would say, it is one of the highest forms of patriotism. And I was looking at some stats. Nearly 600,000 U.S. military veterans are immigrants. If President Trump, I noticed a Marine standing behind him while he was saying all these sort of crazy things, I wonder if that guy wasn't also an immigrant. The reality of the matter is that according to the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, there are over nearly 50% or 50+% of people that are serving in the armed forces right now, defending America, protecting America, are actually immigrants.
Wow.
I want to share something you wrote back in 2018, where you write, "Lately, I felt less at home in this country than I once did. For people who look like me or who follow my Islamic faith, the United States has become a colder place. I no longer am sufficiently American, according to the definition some use today. And this is after I've served my country faithfully and honorably as a proud U.S. Marine." Talk about what it is like today for you, for an immigrant veteran who many would say, this is the best of what America has to offer. Why is it today that you don't feel as at home as you once did?
It's a painful moment. A lot of people ask me, why do you call yourself Muslim Marine and not just Marine? Well, it's actually the times that have called for it. I used to just it was something that I did in my life right after high school. It was something that I was very proud of. But it was 2015, when I came out of my mosque, when one of the local president of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, he asked me, he said, what are you doing? You need to come out of your cave. And I'm looking at him, asking him, what do you mean? He says, Mansour, you're a Muslim Marine. I'm a Muslim doctor. They will listen to you. So here's a Muslim doctor who's saving American lives every single day, but it's just not enough, right? So he felt as if I come and speak about my story, which is an important story, and there's no doubt, I think, as I mentioned already, that it is one of the highest forms of patriotism that anybody can do. So to have these sort of comments that's talking about Islam hates us, as the president has said in the past, is something really scary. I also mentioned recently of in an op-ed by Newsweek of what sort of things my 12-year-old son faced in his school. And in fact, right after the election of President Trump, there was a child, middle schooler. I mean, this is stuff that's crazy because, I went to elementary, middle school, high school here, graduate school, all that sort of stuff. But I don't remember ever being involved with politics as a middle schooler. And there's a kid that comes up to him after the election and says, "Hey, I guess this is goodbye, my friend. No offense. See you later." And he walks away.
Wow.
This is what's happening.
Telling the son of a Marine who has come here, but they're not welcome.
Where do you think this comes from?
Sorry?
Where do you think this sentiment comes from? A schoolboy. You just said it didn't happen to you as a child. Why do you think it's happening to your son today?
I can only point out one direction, and that's the President of the United States. It's unfortunate. I never thought in a million years that's something that I would say. He talks often about respect for America, and we'll have respect again. I travel a lot overseas, and I think America has lost its respect. People are scared of our arsenal, but that's, if you're getting respect through fear, I'm not sure if that's a way of getting respect. I think Americans can no longer sort of, unfortunately, because of this one person who represents the face of America. When you walk into a different country, you may now easily say, I'm an American, because you don't know what the repercussion can be in that country. He's also made it very hard for our members of our armed forces. Again, going back to the military side, there's a lot of immigrants serving in the United States military. He's made their job that much harder. He's made the job of the commanders that much harder. I think recruiting is down significantly. It's a really, really scary position. This is your commander in chief. If I were to join the armed forces today, I've been asked this as well. I'm putting myself on the spot here. I'm not sure if I would come in under President Trump. Knowing very well that he is the commander in chief. He's the one who calls that final shot.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.